Tavita, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about how God's word over your life overrides your past experiences. And what I actually want to do today is be really transparent and use my own personal life as an example. So I'm laying stuff out there for everybody to see, because hopefully my history and my story will help others out there. I grew up with my mother and my stepfather, and they were very verbally abusive. Not physically, but it was more verbal, which was enough within itself. But one of the major things that they used to say about me was that I was stupid, that I wasn't bright, that I was dumb, that I wasn't smart enough to be or do anything, that I would be pregnant before I graduated from high school, that they didn't want to spend money on me to do any school activities because they didn't think I would be worth anything to invest in. So what happened was I developed an identity of being silenced, because I felt like every time I would open up my mouth, stupid would come out. So I was trained to not communicate and not speak at an early age. I was just too afraid to just open up and communicate with people. And that transferred into my adult life. So here I am as an adult in my 20s in the military, being uncomfortable with communicating with people. And you would think that I would have been able to come out of my shell, but that word stupid was so ingrained into me, where my entire identity had actually been wrapped around that word. And I spent years trying to run from that. But no matter what I did, it was always present. And so while I'm trying to play this game with myself to be silent because I didn't want to be rejected by others, it was interesting my interactions with people, because I wasn't unattractive even at that age. So what people interpreted me being attractive and being silent was me being some stuck-up light-skinned chick, which was not the case, because I honestly believed that I was not good enough for anything or anybody. And so I couldn't win for losing. I was either disliked because of how I looked, or I was disliked because I said something that was stupid, according to other people. And so it really hindered my growth in life, because I just really believed that word. And fast forward to the age of 30, that's how long I had actually been dealing with that word. I'm now in college with 2 kids, and I'm sitting at home on my computer, and I happen to be going across my email account. And normally I wouldn't pay attention to stuff like this, but I saw an email where there was no sender and no subject. And I thought that was kind of strange. So I said, let me click on this to see what this is about. And the only thing that was on the email was a picture of Einstein and his brain. And I was like, Lord, what is that? That's interesting. What is that about? And I heard the Father say, I want you to read Einstein's biography. And I'm like, this is the craziest thing for the Father to tell me to do, but okay, I'll do it. So I go and read his biography, and I started noticing similarities with how he processed the world around him. What was so interesting about him, if I could use a spiritual term to define him, I would call him a prophetic scientist, because he had this unique ability to look at creation and with deductive reasoning say, if this is going on here and this is happening here, then this is actually what's going on. And in some things that he was able to see, he didn't test the things that he saw. He just saw it and he called it for what it was, and then he left it. He documented what he saw and just left it. And people after him came back and confirmed what he actually observed was correct. And so I'm reading this and I said, okay, Father, I do see similarities. So what are you trying to tell me? And he said, because I've called you to walk in the spirit of genius. And I was being real sarcastic, and I said, genius is a spirit? That don't even sound like God, but okay. But why are you saying this, Father? I don't agree with that, Lord. Like, I mean, God, I really appreciate that you're trying to tell me that I'm smart. I appreciate that, but I would have appreciated it if you would have used someone just a little bit dumber to make your point, because I'm no Einstein. And the Father said, in the realm of math and science, you're not an Einstein, but in the realm of the spirit, you are. So what I want you to do is I want you to go study the law of relativity until you understand the basic fundamental principle of that law. And if you're able to catch the spiritual parallel to that law, then you can no longer come back and tell me that you are not who I said you are. And I said, okay. And let me tell y'all something. It took me 16 hours straight. I literally sat in front of books and the computer for 16 hours straight trying to understand the law of relativity. And let me tell you something, it didn't make me feel no better while I was studying it, because I tried to study it from an adult's perspective and it did not work. I was literally looking at pbs.org. I looked at physics for dummies, physics for kids. I was looking at highlight books for kids. I mean, it just made me feel so much worse, because I felt like I couldn't get the concept without being talked to like a child. So of course it reinforced the word to me at that point. But because the Father said, study the law, and when you get it, that automatically told me that I'm going to understand this law. I just have to do the work to study it. So to me, it hurt because I was studying childlike stuff, but I really wanted to understand what the Father was saying, and I wanted to understand the spiritual parallel too. Like I said, 16 hours. But when I finally understood the basic principle of that law, I instantly caught the revelation. Instantly caught it. And basically, the law of relativity is the law of position and perspective. Where you're standing determines how you see a thing, or where your position determines how you perceive what's going on around you. And the example that he gave me was, he said, imagine two positions. You are in me and you are outside of me, but my word is going forth. If you're outside of me trying to perceive my word, what's going to actually happen is you're going to have a distorted view of my word, and it's going to take a long period of time for that word to be made manifest in your life. He said, but if you're in me and I am light, if I'm light, then so are you. And what you're actually doing is you're traveling at the speed of light. So in my presence, time ceases to exist. But it's a normal way of functioning for you. But if time ceases to exist for you, when my word gets released out of you and you release it into the earth realm, it's instant manifestation. There's an instant response when my word comes forth, because you're in alignment with me. When you're outside of my word, trying to understand my word, you're out of alignment. That's why it takes a long, drawn out process for the word to be made manifest in your life. When I saw that, I said, oh my God. And what was interesting is that faith became activated the minute I caught that revelation. So I knew that what the Father was saying about me being a genius was true. But check this out though. I actually asked the Father, God, what's your definition of genius? Because I think my definition and your definition is not the same definition. So tell me what you're saying. And he said, daughter, my definition of genius is one who has the capacity to stand and see from the future at all times. And they pull what they see into the present moment. And no matter what a person tries to do to catch up to a genius, they will only pick up pieces of the genius's past, because that genius always lives in the future. So God's definition of a genius is not man's. So it has very little to do with intellect. It has everything to do with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding from a spiritual heavenly perspective. There's so much more to genius. It's being able to see the face of the Father in all things. And in the Father, that's where provision is. That's where your answers are. That's where resources are. That's where your identity lies. So, and I will be honest and say, for those of you who are watching this, that is the same inheritance that's given to you too. That you have that inheritance of being a genius. If you are in alignment with the Father, genius is your inheritance. And I would like to say that everything worked out beautifully after that, where I just believed that I was a genius and I just stood in that and I was in my power. And yes, Lord. No, I still had to deal with the fact that that old record of being stupid was present, but I had another word to override it. So what I had to do was continue to walk with the Father in obedience and dealing with people even after that. I'm 30 years old and I was dealing with church leadership calling me stupid. They didn't say it outright to my face, but they would say things like, that paper you wrote was asinine. That's not good enough. You're not good enough. Dealing with leadership like this. And here's the thing. The Father actually had called me to be connected to those types of leaders. So sometimes we get connected to people and we feel like, well, that's not the Father. God will not put you in a situation that's difficult and uncomfortable where you deal with tyrant-like leadership. Yeah, He will. if there's some discipline that he needs to take you through, if there's a lesson you need to learn, if that will help you become who you are meant to be in the Father, he will put you in situations that burns the hell out of you. And the whole point was to burn the record of that word, stupid, because that word actually became my name. It became my identity. So the Father had to use people around me to bring that up, so I could look at the Father and say, you said this. You kept saying that I'm this. They're saying this, but what are you saying? I literally live by that statement where Yeshua said, you have heard it said, but now I say. Anytime I hear somebody say or do something that don't sound right, God, what are you saying about this? What do you have to say about what this person is saying? And that was one of the major things that I learned from being connected to that type of leadership. Was they're saying this, but what do you say? Because your word always overrides what people say, even regardless. His word always overrides it. You may have to walk out a process where that old record has to be cleansed out of you, but you have to be willing to go through the process to have that record removed. So even though God spoke it, it goes back to when I said about the law of relativity, where you are standing outside of God and you're looking at a word that he's released over you, but you're not perceiving it clearly. And it takes a long period of time for that word to come into alignment with you, is because I was actually outside of that word genius. I was outside of it because I was still operating under the record of stupid. So he gave me that word as a landmark to walk towards. I hope this makes sense. So even though at the moment I was out of alignment with that statement, that was a tool that the Father used to help me get into alignment with that identity, because that's actually who I really was. And so whatever word the Father has spoken over your life is your inheritance, even if it doesn't look like it today. You have to continue to engage the Father with the gradual steps that he has you take over and over and over until that record no longer exists. Because a lot of times I think believers get a prophetic word and they get all happy and excited about what the Father is speaking, but then they do nothing with it. And then they recognize that their life never, ever, ever changes because they don't take the gradual incremental steps to come into the fullness or the fulfillment of that word. It doesn't just stop when the word is released. Opposition comes because of the word. So it makes sense why the Father had me connected to leadership that was just unkind. It makes sense because that record had to be dissolved within me, but it had to come up to the surface. So when the Father speaks a word and you feel like all hell breaks loose, it's supposed to, because the hell was within you, and that's the hell that needs to be removed. That's the dross getting removed. You've been placed on an altar. You're being burned up. It's the fire. You have to get to a point where you're willing to sit in the fire for so long where the fire no longer burns you. If you're still screaming while you're in the fire, you need to stay there. It still ain't done its job yet. But you can get to a point where the fulfillment of what the Father spoke comes to pass, where you are living the manifestation of that. You have to be willing to engage the steps that the Father has you walking through to get to that end result where you are in alignment, where time ceases to exist for you. Because in the Father, time doesn't exist. He's outside of time. And you can get to that point. Who you are is outside of time, but the whole point is to bring that into the earth realm where you're in time, but you don't exist in it. And that's how the word can just be demonstrated around you with such ease. It's possible to get to that point. So I just want to encourage you and say, wherever you're at, keep going. Go back to the words that the Father has spoken over you and see where you're at now in comparison to when he spoke that word. And I hope y'all have a good day. Until next time.